It says got it. Hang on.
Say hello.
I have to click this. Okay. Hey,
Hello.
it seems so false because we've already said hello, but everything's false.
I
So
know. Exactly.
what's the big deal?
Barry's here now too, right on
Oh, there's
time.
Barry in Britain.
Angela should be here too. I haven't heard back from her, but
Well, we'll give it a few minutes. We'll just let guys get comfortable and whatever.
I'm saying that about Angela. Hey, Barry. You missed the hip hop and the Gordon Light. What's his name? Lightfoot? Gordon Lightfoot? You guys know who that is?
Okay.
Angela.
Angela. This is why I'm bringing her up because this is who you were talking to, and anyway, you told me to talk to her, and then I gave her to Barry, so they've been joined.
She's going
But
through a bunch of stuff.
Well, she's the one on the video I sent you last night. She was the one that was at that meeting.
Oh, I
Did you
should
watch the
probably
video?
watch it. No, I didn't.
You didn't watch it? Oh.
You know how many people send me little links to things and stuff, and I'm like,
Well,
none
I
of you
sent you
guys
the
are
video
special,
because you
so I
mentioned the
just
story. No, I mentioned this. I sent that to you because you mentioned the
yeah.
story.
I
And I was
didn't
like,
watch it, but I posted it up on my
mm-hmm.
my page. Pardon me.
Yeah.
You know they've passed a law because we have native title, all sorts of things happening here. I don't know if you guys ever get any news in Australia, but so the Aboriginal community is now getting control over their sacred places, right, in Australia. And Mount Warning is Aboriginal men's mountain where I don't really know much about it, but when boys came of age, the men would take them up there to introduce them to whatever the customs and traditions of being a man in a particular mob, or tribe. They call it mob over here. That particular mob was. And so they've been incensed over how many years at the amount of tourists that just sort of traipse their way up there with no understanding and no respect of their traditional culture. So now nobody can go up there.
Oh.
So yeah, you have to kind of get a permission or something. You have to, it's the same with Uluru, with Ayers Rock. You're not allowed to go up there anymore. They've cancelled all of that. And the chain that used to go from the bottom to the top, I believe, has been cut, and you're not allowed to climb the rock or even touch the rock. And the last pictures that I saw, a friend of mine was out that way. There's like a fence all around it now that's probably about 500 yards from the rock. So you can't even get really close enough to get a,
Instagram messed up everything. It's Instagram.
Yeah, we'll just blame someone.
Well, yeah, let's do Instagram.
We'll play the blame game for a second, because that'll make us feel
mess
a
up
little bad
everything.
non-existent selves. I know, but I just thought it was interesting, and I have quite a few Aboriginal friends that around town here. One of them is actually an incredible photographer, and we don't talk often because he's always on tour. He follows the professional surfing circuit around the world, but sometimes he pops in and just sort of, we have a chat and everything, and he's really up on, and Mike also, can't think of his second name, really up on all everything that's going on with all the sacred stuff that goes on in our country here. But I don't watch anything, so I hear everything secondhand.
Me too.
Yeah, there's enough funny stuff goes on in my day every day anyway. I die daily. So,
well, you should.
Absolutely, we should. Barry, how are you? How's the illusory nature of Barry?
Yeah, well, that illusory nature of Barry is always interesting, Dave. And like you say, every day is like completely random, really.
It is,
yeah.
you stop trying to order it.
Yeah, I've been, you know, wildly out of my comfort zone recently. Like I have been for a long time, but I mean, recently it's been light years out of my comfort zone
Nice.
in different ways. Yeah, with my work, my business, and yeah, and also being a
Everything.
dad, yeah, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, dad to teenagers, you know, and so, yeah, everything. Yeah,
Well, it's a total
I don't.
transformation. So that's a good. It's a good omen. If you're talking to me, if you're talking to somebody else, it might be, you know, another thing. But it is. It's a good omen.
Yeah, yeah. Some people
Keep
just
the
want.
faith. I know you're good at that. Keep the faith. You're my reminder for keeping the faith.
Well, that's
When
what I do,
when the shit
Dave.
hits the fan here, I think of you. Not about the
Well, that's
shit. I mean, about keeping the faith.
yeah. Well, I've studied that for some time now. I think, as you know, Dave, and it's yeah, that's it, really. That's it. Every day, every day. Yeah.
So it's a funny thing. I always find the nature of this transformative process, and everyone has their story that goes along with that, doing the workbook lessons and life in general, as you know, experienced individually. And I always come up against this idea in my mind of the two ways of transformation, from the top down or the bottom up. And the top down is immediate but horrific. Like, I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy if I had an enemy, but I don't. But you know, and from the bottom up seems to be this gradual, Jesus calls it a gently evolving training program, but I don't know if gently would be the I think there's a bit of tongue in cheek there on Jesus' behalf. So it's tends to be quite traumatic at times. But I mean, these things are only our own reactions to them, to the process. But I tend to think there's a lot to be said for drawing your circle. You know, and I know we've done circle work in the past where we just draw the circle and we stand in it and we refuse to adjust no matter what. And my greatest example of that, of course, is Jesus himself in the desert, and 40 days and 40 nights in that circle. And there's a point, you know, like when Jesus says in the course that this course is not beyond immediate learning and salvation is immediate. It's like, well, I don't know how it is for you guys that are doing it from the bottom up, but is there a benefit? You know, it's like I would be asking myself this question: is there a benefit in really putting myself into that circular kind of attitude where I'm not going to adjust for a specific period until I pop out the other side, pardon me, and remember my father, have that experience which releases me from the what would you call it? The releases me from not really obligation to the atonement, but it releases me from definitely the nature of false belief, because I now have two perspectives on life through which to choose to see. Whereas before I had one, the one that I see with my body's eyes and faith. You know, and I had somebody say to me yesterday or the day before about doing a 10-day Vipassana because I'm giving up coffee. This is a funny thing, right? So I have a couple of Facebook things that I run and social media things, and I don't run them particularly enthusiastically or comprehensive. I'm looking for a word there, but it's just when I feel like it. And so I put on one the other day. I thought I'll just see where I'm at with stuff, you know, because everything's a declaration. Once you put out there on your Facebook page, and this is where, Tina, I was trying to encourage you to become a bit more proactive in your social media thing, because you have no control over what comes back when you post something. People can write the most obscure things, but it's like, these are not other people writing obscure things. These are my own thoughts coming back to me, which I react to or don't react to, which I give a meaning or don't give a meaning, depending on the amount of presence I have in my truth, or the amount of awareness I have with the truth that I'm carrying with me. And you'll find that some things just fall away. And oh, we've got an Angela here. Angela, do you have a camera, darling? So, and I put this post up there, Barry, where I, in a sort of a tongue-in-cheek way also, I was talking about giving up coffee, because I genuinely don't really enjoy it anymore. I drink it and it's awful, and my whole mindset about coffee seems to have shifted, and it's like, oh, why am I drinking this? You know, like, what is this stuff I'm drinking? Whereas previously, up until only a week or so ago, I really enjoyed it. It's like, oh, coffee, you know, and there's this sort of subliminal desire for it, or it's almost like an addiction. And so I just put up there, giving up coffee, blah, blah, blah. Good way to self-check, right? So when you give up anything, whenever you let go of anything, it's a really good way to see where your honesty is at with anything, because you'll get stuff comes back, and it'll give you something to self-monitor, right? So I get to self-monitor those pangs for coffee, or those yearnings for coffee, and to see if I really want to give it up. Because in the moment that I truly want to give it up, I not only give up the idea of enjoying coffee, but I give up all the indicators that I need a coffee, all the memory of coffee, everything about coffee. Like, the whole thing's a package. It's not like I give up a bit and it dribbles away, and, you know, so it's like it's done. When you give up the world in its entirety, you give up the whole thing all at once. Whereas when we're doing it from the bottom up, it seems as if we're giving it up a bit at a time, right? We're sort of chipping away at our desire for things. So I put this, there she is, young Angela. Hello and welcome. So I put up this post about giving up coffee, and I had a whole plethora of ideas about what that should look like, right? Which I my finger on my nose. And one of the things that I made specific in the post was that in my self-check, that I'm not looking for something to replace the coffee, right? Which is important, because if you're, let's say, an alcoholic or an addict or anything, which is the history I came from many, many moons ago, one of the things that occurs is when you give up one substance, you automatically, because of the existential anxiety or the existential angst that you suppress through using substances, it tends to emerge again, and you look for something else, and you tell yourself, oh no, I'm not going to use coffee to suppress that moment of inner anxiety. I'm going to stay in the moment with it and allow that anxiety to come out, because that's where the healing occurs, right? It's not in giving up coffee, right? Coffee is just the catalyst. So you give up something, and what you're doing is making a space. It's like when you're in a conversation with somebody and they say something that you might consider perhaps inappropriate, and there's a part of you that feels obliged to respond, or obliged to say something and fill in the gap. Because if you don't say something, they're going to perceive that you consider what they've just said to be appropriate, and your friendship's going to be at risk, because they consider comfortable to express that to you, because they consider you to be friends, right? So there's a gap, and it makes a gap, and you don't adjust to the gap, and you don't fill it in, right? Which is what happens when we do circle work. When we draw our circle and we stand there for 40 days and 40 nights, we're saying, no, I'm giving up the world, and allowing all of that emotionality, all of that anxiety to arise. And there's going to be the temptation to consider, I mean, now look at the idea of Jesus, 40 days and 40 nights. apparently with no food, no water, no nothing, right? And there are other side stories around this particular example that he was supported by the Essenes or all this sorts of different things, and that his circle was metaphorical and all of that, which fine, it doesn't really matter. It's the state of mind, right? But when you go through that, when you undergo that, what happens is I'm saying no to everything, the whole world. It's like I'm going to draw this circle and I'm going to stay here until I either die of the flesh, physically die of the flesh, or remember my Father, remember my Creator, because that's the purpose of the circle. Right? Now, with the exception of like characters like Wim Hof and people like that who put themselves in extreme circumstances and test the power of their will to the utmost limit, you know, things like that. And there are other guys, there's like Bear Grylls. I mean, he has training, but there are these people that really push the limit on their humanity, on their human experience. And I don't know if any one of us is that way inclined, but I often wonder, would it be to an advantage to do that? Like as a man of faith, how big a leap with my faith am I prepared to take, knowing that the power of decision is my own? There's no one to tell me I should or I shouldn't. I feel my heart space. I listen to my heart, and my heart says, I'm yearning for my Father. I'm yearning to know. I want knowledge. I want to remember the truth. And there's this inner calling, and every little leap of faith builds, right? Every little leap of faith increases my faith. Faith is its own reward. So every time I take a leap of faith, I'm buoyed up by it again, and the witness to the support by a higher power becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, to the point where I no longer deny that there is a higher power looking over me, which is what the story that I put in that last video, Tina, where I was hitchhiking. That was one of my most prolific experiments in faith, I guess. And I remember it vividly because of how it panned out. It couldn't have been more obvious. I was picked up in a white Mercedes-Benz convertible with the roof down and two people dressed in white and both very young and beautiful, him and her, and drove me all the way where I needed to go. And there couldn't have been a greater sign to me that this was the car sent by Jesus to pick me up. It was just all white leather seats, gold trim. It was like it was sent from heaven. Swing low, sweet chariot. You know, so is there this advantage, perhaps, because our concern is of the collapse of time, given the mortality of our soul, right? Is there an advantage? And I'm only posing this hypothetically for you to consider, because I know your situation. Is there an advantage to taking a greater leap of faith, a greater experiment, making bolder experiments with faith, right? One of the things that Sri Aurobindo used to encourage his students was absolutely that, to go out away from him, to leave him, and to live by faith, right? Same as Jesus encouraged the disciples. He sent them out 2 by 2. He sent 80 out and none of them came back, you know. But his 12 disciples he would send out and they would cast out demons and do healings in his name and everything. And then they would come back again. They'd meet up in places. But they lived by faith. They lived by what he taught them. And I often think, you know, it's like people go to Vipassana, you know, and do these things. There's a place near me here. Well, it's 1,000 kilometers from here, but Chenrezig, where people can go and do a 10-day. It's not living by faith because you're supported with food and clothing and bedding and everything. But you can do a 10-day silent retreat, which brings up a lot of stuff. But just things like that, you know. I know that there's trying to think of the name of it now, Findhorn in northern Scotland. There's a place,
yeah,
right? So I remember many, many years ago reading a book about Findhorn. It was a beautiful little book, and I think it actually came from there.
I know one of the people that created that place.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been to Findhorn?
I've not been there, no, but I know someone that was an instigator of Findhorn, and it has
Right.
repercussions. Findhorn, you know, it's like a significant.
Right. I would. I mean, we're not having this chat for no reason, because I do know your circumstances. It's like I would probably encourage you to maybe not Findhorn, but whatever comes to your heart, you know, to make a bolder experiment, because there seems to be in you this cycle of always being in it. And I would like to, as he said, I would like to see you living in better circumstances. You know, there's something like it's in all of us, right? It's in all of us. There's something that occurs when you recognize the repetition, or you recognize the cycles of your experience on earth as being repetitive. And it's like, I'm still in this, I don't seem to be able to get beyond this cycle. Right? So usually what I would tell you is something needs to change in here, in the way you're thinking about the cycle particularly, right? And that may necessitate a lot of prayer, a lot of falling on your knees and everything. But also sometimes things need to change in the physical nature. Sometimes a little money clears the pipes. Sometimes an act of faith, you know, like a little adventure, like Frodo Baggins or Bilbo Baggins. You sometimes got to leave the Shire. Sometimes you have to leave the Shire. Having adventures. Hobbits are not fans of adventures, you know, so it takes a lot to encourage a hobbit to leave the Shire, because the Shire has everything they need. It's got family and heartfelt warmth and all these sorts of things, and community, and in a certain kind of a sense, that is what we're looking for. But of course, we're never going to find it in the form, because the form always changes one day after the next after the next, and we tend to put down roots in the place and in the situation and the environment where we feel that heartfelt warmth and that sense of community the most. It's like, oh, I love it here, I think I'll stay. But of course, that's not an adventure. And if nothing else, A Course in Miracles is absolutely an adventure. In fact, Jesus calls it a crusade. It's a crusade, and the motto of the crusade is to listen, learn, and do. You can't have a crusade in your own Shire. So I would encourage you to look at that idea, Barry. Just sit with it for a minute and just see what comes up. Like you just said, Findhorn does have, you know,
repercussions. Yeah,
it does. If that resonates with you on some level, then perhaps sit with it for a second and just see if you get guided in that way. But I definitely would go if I was there. And you said Findhorn for the weekend, I'd be like, hell yeah, let's go check it out. It's not very far, is it? Nothing in England is very far. It's a 4-hour drive south or east to west.
A little bit more than that, but not much more than that. A bit more than that. Yeah.
I drive 12 hours to see my daughter. So that's a little bit more than takes me
years ago, Dave. I was telling Angela this in the week. Me and my wife, my partner, we set off with a horse and cart, and we drove around France for a year with a horse.
Nice.
Just kind of for the hell of it, really, just to see what would happen. And it was the most massive adventure. You know,
Did you get people beeping at you?
Yeah. And that kind of French attitude, you know, like they were very yeah. And they love the horse, you know. They love the horse more than us, I think. And but we kind of got looked after because of the vulnerability of the situation, you know, like totally vulnerable. Totally vulnerable. You got a horse, it needs somewhere, it needs to be looked after, it needs hay, it needs food, it needs water. And we just got looked after for a year, like ridiculously looked after. And made loads of great friends, and had a incredible time. Yeah, throwing caution to the wall. It was
I
great.
think you have
That
to
was
you
really
have to do these things. You have to break the mold. You know, sometimes you have to take yourself up and away and out of your comfort zone. And if you can shut that door behind you without any way to look back, I think that's by far the superior experience or the superior adventure. When you give yourself a safe, you know that you have somewhere to return to if things fall flat. That kind of defeats the purpose to some regard. But since we're learning to become dependent upon our faith alone.
What did
Angela,
you say earlier, David? Faith creates its own.
faith is its own reward.
Faith is its own reward. That's it. Yeah, with that. Yeah,
it's ever increasing. It adds to itself incrementally and exponentially. The more faith, the more acts of faith that you allow yourself to have or to experience or to put yourself into those situations, the greater the awareness of the pertinence of faith in your life becomes.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Yeah.
Good. I clearly remember there was a threshold moment for me in with all my experiences and all my experiments with faith. There was a point in my life prior to the illumination of my mind. There was a point where I didn't want to live the way other people lived. It didn't make sense going to work every day and paying my bills and the same old back and forth. I wanted to live in faith. I'd been reading my Bible. I'd been listening to some of those stories and talking to people. I'd found myself living in a very beautiful part of the country, surrounded by the sannyasins of Osho and the Hare Krishna community, the biggest one in Australia down the road from me, and just a lot of free-thinking, sort of individualistic people. And faith was a common thread through a lot of the stories and conversations that I would have. And I remember thinking, I want to live like that. You know, but of course I just bought a house. I had a mortgage and everything else. And there was this fear of losing everything. And I realized I had to lose everything. I had to just drive out of the front gate of my place and not go back. And that's what happened. I lost it, and in losing that, I found something else. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah.
Give the world, said Jesus, so I did. Eventually, I gave up the car and everything, and I just had pretty much the clothes on my back for a while there. But of course, things gravitate to you when you still operate in the world with an idea of lack or lack mentality. You tend to manifest things, and people call it abundance. It's not really abundance. It's just like, oh, I see that I'm operating from lack, and the void in my life, rather than being filled by the awareness of love's presence, is being filled by material things, which is fine. It still gives you that idea of supply. I mean, God is the supply in both instances. But it's like it's me that's choosing that kind of experience or the non-physical experience. And it's the non-physical experience that we're looking for here. And so I'm telling myself I want to remember my father, and I'm making every kind of advance towards that as an understanding of the activity or the action of my mind in choosing for the present here and now, and finding that moment of stillness, right? And some of those moments, some of those instants are obvious, and some of them you have to have dogged kind of determination and force yourself to actually sit down and be still and do a meditation or something like that. And in the beginning, of course, it is more difficult because you're so heavily loaded with that old way of thinking.
Yeah.
Kevin, how's things in your corner of the metaverse? Have you seen the metaverse?
No. Yeah, I don't know.
You don't know. That's
No,
a good. That's good.
I don't. Yeah, I just yeah, I've got. Yeah, I really don't know. Just got no idea.
You're at peace.
No,
Oh,
not at peace, but I just don't. I just going along and thinking, just see what's going on.
yes, that's something you can do. Let's go along and see what goes along with today's lesson. Well, it's not actually today's lesson, but what lesson are we up to, Tina? Angela, I want to get to you. I know you specifically wanted to be here. Let's get to you now then. Let Kevin enjoy his not knowing and his just going. That's actually the flow, like to not know and to just go along with things is.
Did you want to know the lesson, Dave? I'm sorry.
Yep. Go on.
It's kind of cool. I mean, just the title. I don't know the number. I think it's 140. 140. Only salvation can be said to. Yeah.
We're only up to 140.
Yeah, it's only May. Isn't it 140?
No. The one that we're doing with the workbook, recording the
Oh,
work.
us. Oh, okay. Let me find that. I gotta find
Or
that
should we
out.
do that separately? We seem to have got away on a teaching adventure here anyway.
I thought you were gonna kind of get everyone up to speed, and then we were gonna maybe talk
All
about
right.
doing that. So do this what you're doing, I believe.
Okay. All right. Let's do that. And I want to get back to Kevin as well, because I know there's always something in everything, but.
Beautiful. All right, so.
I've got to keep my finger on my nose here because it's a singular teaching, and the idea that I think there might be a Kevin out there doing something happens is something I want to sit within myself, because like that's where not the answer. I mean, there is no question really, but that's where the prompt for a greater awareness of self comes from. Right. So when I'm going along in my, I don't really know. It's like, well, I've either forgotten my purpose, because when I carry my purpose with me in my heart and mind together, I absolutely know what I'm in any given particular situation for. Right? I'm there to represent him who sent me. But either that, or I'm on the threshold of some kind of advance in my own awareness of myself, where of course it gets incredibly confusing and I don't know. That's the whole point of it. And that's where the existential anxiety and everything tends to bubble below the surface. And all of a sudden you find yourself in this kind of confusion and sometimes upset if you're not au fait with the idea of being confused every time there is a shift. You'll probably be upset about it and want to adjust. And what do we teach? Don't adjust. Do not adjust to your pain. Do not adjust to your anxiety. Do not adjust to all these emotional states that seem to fluctuate in and out of your conscious awareness. Be still in them and allow them to do what they need to do, because there's no such thing as anxiety. There is only the activity of spirit moving in you, badly translated by ego. This is anxiety. This is a sexual impulse. This is what it... No, it isn't. It's a miracle waiting to occur. It's God's will waiting for your permission to say yes and be still and allow it to happen so that you can remember your Father. That's the only thing going on. Ultimately, you can transcend all of that and say that, well, there's actually nothing going on here, which is the higher truth. But you can't two-step it to the higher truth immediately. You have to have this kind of a process in between, or the shock to the system would be so great you'd end up wandering the streets wearing rags and you know, talking to trees and things like that. So we have this process called healing that helps us acclimatize ourselves to the fact that we're involved with something that is going to change our perception of ourselves and the world in its entirety. It's like a bridge. And I think Jesus even talks about it as a bridge between our way of seeing the world and seeing the forgiven world. If you were to jump that bridge without doing the work, without applying the principles and everything else like that, it would be too much of a leap to take. And I know that from my own experience of jumping the bridge, having been experienced the memory of my father from the top down. And had it not been for Ted and Annie and all the guys at the healing center that were there at that time, who formed an incredible and very nutritional support framework for me, I would have lost my mind. I would have been out in the streets, like talking to birds and talking to the trees, and you know, I would have been happy, but but that's what happens. Angela.
Hi.
What's going on? Hey, what's going on with you? I remember you wrote to me and you said something, that was a while ago, so I like to look at it from the idea that this is already over, so you must have at some point crossed that threshold between where you were at with things and...
Yeah. Yes, I have. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. It was a bad one. A big one.
It was
big
a
shift.
bad one.
Big shift. Yeah.
Did you go a little bit loopy-loo there?
100%. Yeah. It was a big one. Yeah.
And yet here you are again.
Again, yes. I think I got used to the shifts the way they were and stayed with them. But this one was a different one. It was accelerated and it stayed a long time. Constantly changing, but stayed a long time. But I got there. I got there, but it was really difficult. Yeah.
I always like to remember that you will get there because you did already.
Yes. Yeah.
You're just reviewing a dream that's already over, but when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to remember that sometimes.
That's the thing. It's sometimes you can't, sometimes you're too far in it to be able to just ground in it to know what's happening. You just can't grasp it.
No. And the temptation to want to grasp at it is actually what prolongs
makes it worse. Yes.
Makes it worse, exactly.
Yeah.
You
I learned
have to let go.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad. That sounds like you've had fun anyway.
Well,
your energy here today seems quite clear. Anyway, there's no marks against your I don't want to say aura, but your presence. There's nothing there. Like Tina, yeah. She's covered. Just kidding. Just throwing you in there.
Yeah.
I just thought I was okay. That's why. I'm sorry.
No. I like to present it from the shock value of the revelation of things. You know, it's like, holy cow. You're just looking at little moments or little glimpses of there is no world. I mean, the whole teaching that there is no world, you know, and yet every time, and you don't really know, this is where you try to grasp at things, right? So the conscious mind can't know that there is no world because everything in the conscious mind is the domain of the world. It is what it's it's what the world is, right? Consciousness is the domain of ego, and ego assumes automatically that it is the rightful power or the rightful authority in the world, which in my own practice, I just let it be that. It's like, yep, if there's a voice, if there's a dictatorship, if there's something going on that tells me that there's a world, it's like, that's fine. Let it tell me there's a world. But of course, the Course undoes that bit by bit, lesson by lesson, and gives you these opportunities to catch glimpses of, which seems to be glimpses initially, or instants of recognition that the world is not the way I thought it was, or it doesn't operate the way that I assume it does, or the way that I've allowed myself to listen of my own internal dialogue that tells me that's how the world is. Right? And of course, when you take little leaps of faith, you understand that, hang on a minute, there is another way of living in the world. There's totally another way of living in the world and being in the world and operating and doing everything in the world. And those moments, like I said before, they're accumulative. They add up. And so every time you have a shift, Angela, or every time you go through something, and they do change. And I want to tell you a bit about that. But every time there is a shift, you're actually shifting into a greater understanding that there is no world. So attempting to understand what's going on with a mind that only believes that there is a world is never going to be successful. You have to allow that rug to be pulled firmly from under your feet so that you can collapse, if you like, into a screaming heap, and you have to let it all fall apart. And of course, we don't like to do that because we like to maintain our sense of integrity with our accomplishments as being a capable person, you know, and being able to operate in the world and hold our head high and all this sort of thing, and meet the world on equal terms. I think Jesus uses that phrase in the Course. And of course, when you have to admit to yourself that you can't meet the world on equal terms, that you're a failure and that you're failing at your what would you call it, your duty, or failing at your ability to navigate the world and to deal with it on equal terms, it tends to do that. It tends to pull the rug from under your feet. And the scrambling to make sense of it is trying to stay on top of it all. You know? Whereas the only thing I would tell you is stop trying to stay on top of it all. Let it fall apart. You know, the greatest spiritual teaching you'll ever discover is fuck it. Fuck it. I'm going to lose everything again. Everything's going to fall apart again. Right? And I'll start back at square one again, whatever that is. I mean, everyone's perception of their lives is different, I guess, to some extent. But we all have this understanding that when the rug's pulled from under our feet, we have a bottom line. We have an understanding of our lives of what that was like last time, or how we've been at the lowest in our life. And there's something in us that says, I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to feel that way again. I don't want to experience loss to that degree again, or emptiness to that degree again. But when you realize that your goal is not of the world, it becomes a little easier to say, fuck it. It's like, fuck it. All right, this is what I signed up for. To give up the world. What am I going to do? Give up the world and then try to keep it all together? That's going to be awfully hard work, because I can't reach two goals at the same time. I have to be willing to walk out of my front door and not look back. And that's in a mental sense. To leave behind everything I think I know about the world and discover something completely new about it, which I actually already know somewhere in my mind, but I'm just keeping at bay for the little bit that I think I've mastered so far. It's like building a house. When you build a house, you put the roof on first. Right? and then you have to build the rest. But when you put the roof on, essentially you're sheltered from the elements. Now, if you live where I live here, you only need a roof. You don't need walls and windows and doors. Not really. But the house isn't complete without all the other, and that's probably not a great analogy, but right. But it's good. Like try to equate all that confusion and turmoil, inner turmoil and everything of the shift as being something healthy, being something good. Because on the other side of it, there is, and sometimes you don't even recognize it until a little bit later. On the other side of it, there's that shift in consciousness where you suddenly realize, hey, I'm a bit different. And I've had people come up to me without me recognizing the nature of the shift in my consciousness. I've had people come up to me and go, oh, you're different. You've had a shift. And this is people in a spiritual community, in a sense where people are attuned to that sort of happening. And it's been the same for me also. I regularly find that people that I associate with and whatever, when they go through a shift, I'm aware of it, often before they are. Right? They're still operating on some level, in some aspect from their old perception of themselves. And it takes a second for that to drop in, for that new thing to drop in when the shift occurs, and to realize that not that something has been added, but that something has been removed from the script, right? Something has been taken out and a clear and peaceful space has been allowed to stay there or remain without it being cluttered up. And you find that you just become more quiet and more peaceful within, less concerned with the world and all the goings on, and you feel less attracted to all the hubbub and everything that you might have once felt attracted to, which would give you plenty of material to fill in the gap so you don't have to be still, right? All of that confusion and turmoil that you have when you go through a shift is kind of like forging an opening, forging a place in you where stillness has been given permission to be, instead of whatever it is that you would normally have filled up that still place with, relationships or shopping or food or drugs and alcohol, any like it's endless. The potential for human miscreation is, it's vast. You only have to turn on the television and see how, like, it's like, really, we believe this now, and really we're doing that now. It's like, when does it ever end? But there's always going to be something, and the more that awaken, the crazier that's going to seem, right? But running parallel to that is going to be your awakening mind that is used to the idea, or that has become acclimatized to that idea because of the shifts you've been going through, that doesn't see it as crazy. It just sees it as the nature of the beast. And the beast literally, it's like eventually you run out of tricks. Eventually you run out of potential, which is what the human, what would you call it, identity is. The human identity lives on potential, time, right? And as you learn to collapse your own timeline, you see less and less familiarity in the timelines presented by the world and in the opportunities in the world to engage with the world on its own terms, and more opportunity within you to take your rest, to be still and to enjoy and commune with that higher sense of self, which gives you that rest and gives you that beautiful where you work pays off. It's like you trust in salvation, you trust in Jesus, you've accepted it somewhere, and in your mind you're remembering your acceptance because it is already done. The dream is already over. The moment you said yes to Jesus, it was already over. Now you're just going through the particulars of your yes. In time, that seems to take a certain amount of period of time. But don't forget that the miracle is at your command, right? The power of decision is your own. I can choose to be miracle-minded here. I don't have to struggle all the way through this shift, right? I can just let it be miraculous, and I can ask for help, right? One of the things that we often don't want to do, or completely, it's like it gets obliterated out of our mind, is remembering to ask for help, right? Jesus talks about it as we think it's like a sign of weakness. But I think there's a point for me anyway, when I realized that I could ask for help, and that asking for help wasn't now a point of weakness. It was actually, aha, this is something I actually have to do, because I'm learning to communicate, and asking for help is part of that communicative process. Right? I've already transcended the idea, oh no, I don't, I can do this, you know, I did it my way. It's like, I've already transcended that idea. It's like, it's not weak to ask for help, but now I have to remember to ask for help. And of course, when you're in a shift, and when everything seems to be whizzing around you at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and the world doesn't make sense and everything, and you're trying to grasp for something to hang on to make sense of it all and to get you through, asking for help seems to be like way off. Which is why mind training is important. The mind training is like, hang on, I need to make this part of my internal dialogue with myself here, right? I need to ask for help. It's like the rules for decision, or the rules for setting up your day, are very much structured around that. You tell yourself the kind of day you want, and you set your day up properly. I want a peaceful day. I want a day of loving, of giving and receiving. And you like, don't turn it into a ritual, but you just sort of put it in your head what you want, so you can recognize better when that's not occurring. You can see where you haven't been really truthful about that, and it becomes easier to identify those opportunities to choose again, to choose better. You know, oh, now I need to ask for help. I don't need to choose it. I don't need to choose again as in, oh, I'll just make it all better myself. I'm learning to choose again because I'm learning to become dependent on God. I'm learning to ask for help within. If I make my own corrections, I'm representing myself, and nothing more can be added. I need to remember that, hang on a minute, this whole journey is about me that seems to think I'm here, and God that I seem to think is somewhere over here, coming together and having this moment of reunion or union. And that's happening incrementally as I do my workbook. It's happening incrementally as I apply the principles of the curriculum to the particulars of my own daily life. It's like asking for help is, and the funny thing is, you know, have you ever seen any of those old pirate movies? I think in the Pirates of the Caribbean, where they go down the what are they called when the ocean spins around down to a whirlpool, where they go down the whirlpool, and it's like, you know that the ship's going down the whirlpool, right? There's no point running around the deck, pulling in the sails, trying to get out of it and whatever, because it's bigger than you. You can't do anything about it. You just hang on and you go for the ride, right? But of course, when that whirlpool's, when you're caught in it, and when everything seems to be going through that shift and transition, and you're going around and around, all that you do is panic. All that you do is try to fix it and stop it and try to get out of the whirlpool. But yet when you get to the bottom of the whirlpool, there's no more whirlpool. I actually don't know what's at the bottom of a whirlpool, but again, not another great analogy. But there's got to be a happy ending at the end of your analogies, or they're not really good, are they? But you get the idea. It's like I'm in that whirlpool, and I seem to think there's something I can do about it. I'll coil the ropes on the deck, you know, or I'll batten the hatches. It's like the ship's going down. It's like adjusting the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's going down. Stop trying to get a better view. Stop trying to adjust the deck chairs. Let it happen. Let it all fall apart and find yourself on the other side of that falling apart where there's a new moment. Jesus says you will experience some confusion every time there is a shift. It's like, again, tongue in cheek. Some confusion seems to be a hell of an understatement. And like you said, those shifts can change. Those shifts can, the way they look or the way they present themselves, and this is a big one. I might have to go and get a glass of water, but the way they present themselves can manifest in many different ways. Angela, you've gone dark there. Are you under the dark side?
I'm going to put a light on.
Oh, is it morning there or is it going night?
It's
Night
the
time.
north,
There.
Here, it's
Yeah,
going
so-
down there and coming up here.
it's the north of England. It's that bit darker.
Right.
As always.
I was wondering, I was like, I saw light and it's like 9 o'clock there for you guys, yeah? I was like, wow,
Yeah.
it's 9
Yeah.
o'clock and they have a light. Wow.
No, that's cool.
It's
Yeah.
dark here. It's dark here at 9 o'clock. Dave, you were talking about something, what's been coming up? Please stay with Angela. But as you're talking, the thought that's been kind of, with all the stuff that's been happening in my experience, I just keep coming back to take no thought. That part in the Bible, just like, what is there? Like, I just have to totally, I can't figure anything out. That section in the course where it's, I don't know what anything is for. I've been just living with it. I don't think I need any other thing right now. I don't know what anything is for. But also in the Bible that just take no thought.
And yet you're taking thought.
And yet I'm taking thought. No, yeah, and yet I'm taking thought. It's very scary.
You're thinking about taking no thought.
Yeah.
Right? It's literally an action. So it's been coming up for you, take no thought, take no thought. Is that what you're saying?
No, take no thought. And then, yeah, and then just when I'm really still, like it's really frightening though. Like it's just all
Yes.
occurring in this moment, in just this
Good.
moment, just this
Right.
moment. And that's,
Let it be frightening. Right?
yeah,
Like I said, that's only your ego giving it a false label. Now, think of it as just energy. Don't call it frightening. Don't call it whatever. Right? Try to see it as just energy. Right? So misguided miracle impulse. You can use that for sex. You can use it for whatever people use it for. I feel like I need to something. And there's always this tendency to want to label everything. This is coming up and it's frightening, right? It's like, hang on a minute. No, this is coming up, right? I've got this energy coming up. I don't know what to do with it. I don't want to call it something because then I'm giving it a meaning and then I'm giving it a power to affect me by the meaning because all my thoughts have power, right? So let me just be still in it. Now, of course, you're going to equate it with frightening because this is a journey into fear. It's a journey into terror, into that moment of terror. And it's like with Angela, when you go through a shift, there's a tendency to want to grasp for something familiar because it's new ground. You're always having a shift into new ground, into new understanding or greater understanding. And it's not that it's really new. I mean, you already know the truth. It's in you, right? But because you're remembering it as if it was for the first time, it seems to be unfamiliar territory and you're looking for something familiar. And so you say, this is not good. It's like anything. It's like when the Pilgrims came to America or the Dutch came to Australia and they discover the new land. Everything's new. Everything's different. And they bring with them everything from home so they don't feel completely alien in a new land. They bring all their own animals and their own plants and they start setting up the same very thing they left behind. Right? The same structure of government, the same way of living, the same rules, the same sort of regulation. And before you know it, they may as well have not discovered a new country at all. Right? Exactly the same in spiritual transformation. You're going to be coming up against this thing which is telling you, take no thought. And when you sit there with that, when you sit there in that silent moment, it's going to feel scary because you're not used to that. You've become dependent upon that internal dialogue to tell you everything, absolutely everything. All of a sudden, Jesus is telling you, stop listening to that internal dialogue to tell you what things are. It doesn't know nothing. It's just going to offer you what it thinks it knows, which is only based on time and space. But Jesus is offering you an experience that has nothing to do with time and space at all. Imagine the guys that first went to the moon. I mean, if they did, there's conspiracy about that. But imagine the guys that first went to the moon. Like, you think those guys weren't terrified? Being shot in a little tin capsule, fucking 2 million kilometers, whatever, and touching down on some place where if they get a pinprick in their spacesuit, they're dead, you know, or it's like every fear would run through their mind. They have practiced again and again and again emergency procedures for every possible foreseeable thing that could go wrong before they even leave home. Right? A Course in Miracles is a way of giving you enough mind training so that when that moment occurs in your thinking, you're not going to adjust to it. When that tiny moment of terror and you cross that threshold between what seems to be life and what life actually is, you're not going to adjust to it. Right? But it's going to be what you would call scary. But instead of looking at it as scary and being fearful of it, try to think of it as energy. The same way when you go on a roller coaster and it goes to the top and you know damn well it's going to go whoosh down the other side and your stomach's going to come up in your mouth and you're going to have this horrific sort of moment for a second, but that's the thrill, right? That's why you pay for a roller coaster. But this is the same sort of thing. This is a interdimensional roller coaster. You're being prepared for revelation. This whole course is making you revelation ready, right? You're learning to become miracle-minded so that you're at the point of revelation readiness. Miracle-mindedness for revelation readiness. And you have to stop equating or process with fear and more with remembering, right? The ego, of course, is always going to, it doesn't have anything to offer you but fear. Right? When it happened to me, when that moment of revelation occurred to me, it felt like my mind was being sucked out of my I don't even know how to describe it, but my consciousness was being sucked out of my mind, or my mind sucked out of my consciousness. And it felt like I was losing myself, like losing grip on reality, on sanity, and everything, just for a second. When it occurred, I didn't even have time to say what the. Everything just vanished, blink, 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 like that. Jesus talks about it in the Bible as in the twinkling of an eye, right? Twinkle, twinkle, twinkle. It was so fast, right? The terror, that tiny moment of terror, was literally maintained by me in holding it off, in saying no to it. And I was saying no. I didn't have the luxury or the advantage of A Course in Miracles at that time. I only had what I was able to learn along the way. I didn't realize that my actual activity of mind was in denial. I would have sworn black and blue in the face that I was looking for God, but at the same time, looking back now, I could have told you that I had no clue that I was looking for God. I didn't really know what I was doing. It was like I was stumbling down one gully and up another hill and into a pothole and out of a ravine, and like it was just this horrific, seemingly messy adventure, but at the time it was an incredible adventure. The people, situations, and events that led from one to another, to another, to another. And it's like the only books I had at that time was things like The Alchemist, Paul Coelho, and the Bible, which I had no clue how to make any sense of it. And Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, which came along much later, that would have been probably advantageous if I'd have discovered it a little earlier. But everything's always perfect. It all works out perfectly. But in the stillness, it's going to bring up everything you've got left. Right? It will feel like being sucked down the plug hole. It will feel like terror. But don't call it terror. Right? Think of it as like the void. In the East, they talk about it as you're being sucked into the void. Now, if God is everything and God is a singularity, then there's no such thing as the void. Right? How can a void exist if God is complete? Right? There can't be anywhere at any time where anything is lacking in conscious mind or in the states of consciousness that we call perhaps the bardo or in between states. It's complete. Right? But that doesn't imply that it's familiar. That doesn't imply that it's something that you're going to comprehend, right, and be okay with, which is why the mind training is so heavily geared towards faith and not needing to comprehend, not needing to know, being able to take a step into the unknown and allow that to be actually okay, even though there's already this inner admission and inner awareness of the fact that it's probably going to be scary and there's going to be a lot of confusion and I'm going to be way out of my depth. That's fine. Remember who walks with you. Right? It's like remembering to ask for help. Sometimes it seems to be the last thing we bloody remember to do. Why didn't I ask for help at the start of all this? You know? Why didn't I just get to my knees and ask for help at the start? Because at the start you still had all this hubris and bravado, you know, that you're convinced within yourself, I can deal with this. I'm okay. I'll be fine. It's funny. You look back, Angela, like, pardon me, you look back 6 months or a year from now at this video and you'll remember clearly the shift you've just gone through and you'll be like, oh my God, that's exactly me. And the further you get from the point, the clearer the view gets. The higher up the mountain, the greater the vista, you know? So, but you have to stop equating, even though it is a journey into fear, you have to stop equating it as being fearful, right? And learn to see fear as just an energy. It's just energy. You can see everything as just energy, right? I'm not a body. You're not a body. We are mind, Christ mind, God mind, experiencing itself as this energetic fabrication that we call body, time, space, whatever. And through the utilization of the principles of the course, where I give up on my own terms, trying to decide what communication is, I can actually learn what communication is of him who was sent to teach me, right? The Holy Spirit within me. The funny thing is, I think communication is, you know, I bump into somebody at a coffee shop and we sit down and we talk about all sorts of crap and then we leave and and you look at it and you're like, what was the point of all that? Mm. You know, we just talked about shit for an hour and what am I going to do? Talk about more shit next week and next week? That's not communication. That's validation, right? That's a deliberate attempt to validate the physical nature of life rather than to enter into that moment of total discomfort where I recognize in my own thinking, I don't know what communication is. I'm trying to communicate with the universe, with God. I'm one with all things. I'm told this. I want to experience it now. I want to experience it. But to do that, I have to be willing to go beyond what I'm aware of so I can actually communicate with life on its own terms, not on the terms that I think it should communicate with me at. You know, otherwise, I'm still trying to paddle my own canoe. And I'm just going to end up in that whirlpool going down to wherever they go. I don't know. The octopus garden under the sea. You know? So communication is seen in light. And Tina, when you are still, when you take no thought, you will enter directly into light. When you close your eyes and you go into a meditative posture within, in the beginning, it seems like there's nothing in here. There's just this pitch black kind of thing with a voice, you know, this dull kind of awareness of myself. And I don't even know where myself is in here. I close my eyes and it's like, where is the me that's thinking all these thoughts? And you soon come to the conclusion that there is no you in there thinking all those thoughts. You can't find the source or the origin of that thinking. So trying to find it and looking at that thinking as a way to help guide you then pretty quickly becomes seen as obviously not helpful to what it is you're trying to do. So when you take no thought, I'm going to sit there. So the last lessons in the workbook, we say God is, and then we cease to speak, right? The whole procession of those 365 lessons leads to that. We say God is, and then we cease to speak. No. And you get a flash of light, right? But that takes determination. And that light brings joy all the time, joy and happiness and peace and everything that comes with it. It takes determination, and you only have to cross that threshold once, right? Once that threshold that you call fearful or full of anxiety or full of whatever it is that you want to try and label it as, once you've done that once, it no longer exists, because you're actually operating not only just from the other side of it where you actually already are now, but you're operating from the certainty of a position that, having gone through it once, it couldn't prevent you from communication. It has no power over you. You're free. If it has no power over you once, it never has any power over you to begin with, and can't have any power over you to, you know, you're afraid of something literally that doesn't exist. But it's like if you have I'm looking for an analogy here. If you have something that you value very much, like you might have a claim as a prospector in a gold mine, and you don't want anyone else to know that hole you've been digging in a rock is a vein of gold, you'll put signs up and things. Don't go here, dangerous rock falls, death, blah, 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 whatever. You know, but you know that what's in there is really an incredible treasure, right? But you've been gone from the treasure so long that you come back to those signs and you think, oh, someone's put signs up here, don't go here. And you forgot that it was you. Right? I don't know if that's a great analogy either. That's probably going to be a good title for our video today. Not good analogies by Dave, but the whole idea of the journey into fear is only made valid by you discovering that fear. And if you're discovering it, awesome. I wish I could hold your hand, and in a sense, in a higher sense, I am. Right? I wish we could walk together through that, and in a higher sense, I am. And it would be helpful, which is why I encourage you guys to sort of meet up and have get-togethers or whatever. You know, take Jesus by the hand, right? Tina, ask for help. I told you a little while ago that I knew you were pretty close to a revelation, right? There's something going on in you it's like you get up to the edge and you drop back again. You get up to the edge and you drop back again. And you'll do that again and again and again until you're sick of doing it. Eventually, you're going to kick yourself in your own pants and you're going to go, for fuck's sake, Tina, let's just get this done, right? But until that point, until you make that decision, which somewhere in your mind you've already done, because remember, this is a dream we've already awoken from, right? We just find ourselves back in time experiencing it as if we haven't done it, as if it's yet to be accomplished. It's actually already accomplished. We're just reviewing what's already gone by with the added advantage now of the miracle, which collapses the time that takes. Okay? You've already crossed that threshold in your consciousness somewhere. How you did that without the miracle, I don't know. But now you have the advantage of the technology that Jesus has inserted through the course and said, here, learn to be miracle-minded about everything, including your awakening, not just getting stuff in the dream and getting through your day, but your awakening in the overall picture of the spectrum of human, you know, from human to spirit, boom, boom. So it's like you will continue, now that you know it's there, take no thought, you will continue to come up against that until finally, whether through an incredible act of courage and faith or through the collapse of the loss of your self-identity and the dark night of your soul, you're going to transcend that limit and have a revelatory experience. But my certainty to you is you can ask Jesus for help with that to go through that at any time you want to. Right? It's like with Angela. Don't forget to ask for help. Doug, don't forget to ask for help. You're not alone and friendless. You're not alone in a strange place here. Right? Ted used to talk about them as the tech crew. There's a whole bunch of guys. There's a whole bunch of minds that are overseeing the atonement, right? Which are waiting on your very invitation, because you have free will, right? To ask for help, and that help will be given. Don't expect it to look like how you think it ought to look like, because you're just going to get in the way, but it'll be given. And you kind of have to listen for guidance regarding it. You know, it's like all these things work together. I remember we did an outreach thing. There was little Sienna. Well, she shouldn't call her that now. She's older, but the entity known as Sienna. And Luke and I were traveling in my van. We did about a 2,000-kilometre journey to Sydney or Canberra from Byron Bay. And we stopped at places. We had contacts to meet along the way, other people that were course related and course groups and whatever. We had this kind of network thing that we would go and drop off books and little 20-minute books and sparkly books and whatever, and videos that the old man had made. And we would always be loaded up with box loads of gear. And we got to, I think it was Canberra, actually, the national capital. And Sienna was going through stuff. She'd never been so far from home before. She was only 20, 21 years old or something. She was definitely out of her comfort zone. And I think it was Luke, or it might have been Gina. Anyway, there was three of us. And actually it was Gina, I think. But we recognized that Sienna had this energetic thing going on, right? She was obviously very uncomfortable. She was expressing frustration and all of this kind of thing, which is exactly the whole purpose of the whole journey that we were there. It was to get out of our comfort zone, to do something different and to push our limits, right? So to open us up to new experiences. And so we made a decision. We'll pull into this park. We pulled in at this big football field. There was nothing happening. It was just vacant. And there was a car park. There was no other cars, no other people around. We pulled in at this football field. And we took our course books, our Course in Miracles books, and we walked out into the center of the field. And we sat down, the three of us, on the grass. And we just opened the book and we started reading. We took turns to read. And we did something that, prior to going on our little adventure, was something that we did as a collective group. There was 50 or 60 of us at the healing center. We did that every day, like it was familiar. It was a way for Sienna to feel a little bit comfortable in the middle of a place where we didn't know what she was going through and everything was going on, and we just wanted to nurture her with a bit of support that was, conducive to our purpose and everything. Anyway, so we're sitting in this football field in the nation's capital, and this other car pulled in and parked beside our car in the car park, and a woman walked over to us in the middle of the field. And I thought maybe she was some sort of curator of the grounds and was going to ask us to leave. We were not supposed to be there or something. But anyway, she started walking around us in a circle reading from the Bible. It was quite bizarre, right? So you never know how things is going to look, right? You just don't know how things are going to look. And I forget what she was reading now, but it was New Testament. And she kept walking around. And she was a little distance from us. She was like walking around maybe 10 feet from us, like in a circle. And I remember saying to Gina or Sienna, I said, if she walks around us one more time, I'm going to ask her to join our group. I'll just ask her to sit with us and read with us, and we'll just see what happens. So she did. She walked around one more time, and I invited her to join us, and she was very happy to join with us in our little thing. So the four of us sat there for about an hour, and she asked if she could read us some passages from the Bible, and we asked if we could read us some stuff from the course. And we had this kind of like connection going on where on a very superficial level we were getting along and everything. And then she invited us to her community church. I think it was that night or the next night. They had some celebration going on. And when we turned up, their mode of celebration was music, hands in the air, very Pentecostal sort of thing, which was very similar to our Sunday services at the Healing Center where we were from. And Sienna felt right at home. She just totally had this massive release and was able to let it all go in doing that. And she was fine for the rest of the journey. But prior to that experience, she was at her wit's end. She was struggling, like really struggling. We had to stop. We had to be still in our journey and reconnect with the Spirit, reconnect with God, and allow something else to happen that was not of our making. And that's what was presented, right? Now that's divine, right? That woman appeared out of literally nowhere, invited us to her church. It's like God looked down and said, I got this. Trust me. And we just said, yes, yes, yes. And we went along, and Sienna had her whole thing and everything opened up for her. And we continued on our way. It was beautiful. And not only that, but the witnessing to that whole event. It might just seem a small thing, but to Sienna, it was monumental. It's something that stands as a hallmark of her faith, a hallmark of her process, and stands as witness to her transformation to this day. And mine. It's like, really, how many times have you sat somewhere and people just circle you reading the Bible? It's kind of funny, It's like the sharks in the ocean, you're stuck on your raft and the shark's going around. You think you're going to be eaten by the shark or something's going to happen. And the shark's inviting you to the octopus's garden, and down you go. I'll make something out of that analogy yet, that whirlpool. I think it's going to be Kevin's analogy. He's just going along with it. So anyway, Tina, take no thought and have no fear. You will be hurled into reality, and you won't have a thing to say about it. All right? All you can do is be grateful. Thank you, Father. I'm in a process. Thank you, Father. It's uncomfortable right now. Thank you, Father. I have faith that you will see me through it. by your faith alone. And I know you have faith. It's always in like the 11th hour or the 12th hour, whatever it is, where your faith is rewarded. Just when you think you can't do it anymore. That something else occurs, something else happens. You just have to be willing to say yes. Yes, Father, I'm willing to step out of my comfort zone. Yes, Father, I'm willing to look at my own thinking on this. I'm willing to invite the Holy Spirit in. I'm willing to accept the help as it's given. And just sit with it. Just sit with it. I mean, you're in it all the time. Everyone. If you could find one honest moment in a person's consciousness, in the history of their entire experience of themselves on earth, it would be the same moment in any given situation. That honest moment is something that, try to imagine it, that God put there waiting. Jesus talks about it in the Course as the prayer of the heart. God put it there himself. But that's a moment of total surrender, total honesty, total openness, total vulnerability. It's not like you're making a journey to discover that moment. That moment's in you now. It's been there since the day you were born, supposedly born. And everything else on the physical level, on the superficial level or conscious level, is carefully designed by you to avoid it. It's like a little kid in Disneyland. I just want to go on one more ride. And your parents, they're done, you know, they want to take you home. And you're like, just one more ride. And you'll come up with any excuse, any reason why to have one more ride. We may never go to Disneyland again. But it's there. That moment's in you now. You ready, Tina? Yes. Let it happen. Just let it happen. Transcending consciousness is not all it's cracked up to be. They make it sound so romantic in the books. When you go to temples and places, they give you some beads and some incense and teach you to say a few mantras. And it's like, oh, isn't this nice? Aren't these people lovely? Vegetarian food, dancing and celebration. And then here, read this book, Bhagavad Gita, Holy Bible, Course in Miracles. You have to laugh. It's like really the whole thing. You just got to really laugh the whole thing. Like all of time and space, it's nothing but a mad idea, a tiny mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. We're just remembering to laugh together. We laugh ourselves awake, really. We realize the foibles of our ways. And it's like, oh my God, I've done this to myself. Don't Doug loves that realization. Every time he remembers that he's doing it to himself, he laughs his head off.
Mm.
Funny stuff. It's funny stuff. But on this side of the veil, it seems very serious. Until you cross the veil, until you cross that threshold, until you have a moment of total clarity, of total fearlessness, it seems very serious. It seems like everything's about to crush in on you and cave in on you. It's like, perfect. That's exactly what meant to happen. Yes, yes, yes. Let it all come crushing down. Let it all for the Tower of Babel and have an experience. You're doing well, Tina. You cannot not be but doing well. You're exactly in the right place, the right time, hearing exactly what you need to hear, going through what you need to go through. God's will is done. There's no alternative to that, no matter how much I might want to stamp my foot and wave my fist at the sky. The point of surrender is inevitable. All right, let's do a minute. Let's take it. Doug, anything? I think I've...
Who, me?
Who, me? You've done something with your hair.
Yeah, I usually get rid of it up there. So past several months, my meditations have been completely great. I mean, just disappearing, complete love, complete stillness, just unity. I disappear into nothingness and come out of it in deep gratitude. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was in for a major shift. It all fell apart. And I feel like right now I'm on the verge of something big. And you know why, Dave? And I have you to thank. And I've got to thank you, my friend. You know why? Because of your faith that you have and that you've shared with me. And you've said how many times that you just let go and you trusted and let go of everything. And I know that I've been in denial. I know that my life has been a sham in terms of living by faith. And I've come to that understanding finally. And through the miracle, the small miracles of having faith, I can only imagine what it's like if I really, really trust and let go. And you know what? I'm thrilled like a baby, thinking about finally walking out the door and starting my life again, like whatever happens. And do you know I'm 68 years old? And do you know I've really never done that? And I had a dream the other night. In the dream, it said, you have to die to be reborn.
Yes.
And I thought, am I really going to wait to die again on a material level to be reborn? Or am I going to do it now? Am I going to do it now? And so the past couple of weeks have been real fun. I got to tell you, I'm having a fucking blast. No. No, 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 no. So the past and past memories or names of people, like this little coping ego skill to bring me back into life in this world that I can't stand anymore. My ego is having, I'm tired of this world. And I'm not a fan of it. And I know that, because I will say this other thing and then I will round it up. I enter the circle of healing on the floor here. I enter it and I allow myself to go to whatever. And through your help, Dave, emotional releasing, just the whole works, and not being afraid and reaching out and asking God and Christ for help. And I feel God in Christ with me. Well, last 3 or 4 days ago, I did it. And I reached up and the whole universe just descended upon me. I was completely filled with light. I was the universe. And I just disappeared and I just generated light. And do you know how grateful I was that I finally, well, not finally because I'm not, you know how grateful I was that I could for 30 seconds just lay there as a child, just spinning through the universe, just total love. And it didn't scare me. I was kind of expecting it, kind of like know it's there. So yeah, I'm on the verge, and in terms of like Finhorn or something, I mean, somebody take this body and just, use it to get rid of whatever's left of my fucking ego. Because like I said, 3 weeks ago, you asked me how I was. I was really doing good, transcending and people, and just loved everybody. And then it all disappeared. So if that disappeared and I was doing well then, imagine when this disappears, like what's gonna take its place. Oh, fuck.
God only gives. God only gives. There's always more. There's always a greater awareness. There's always an ongoing advent of the beneficence of true communication. One of the things, and Barry, this is more to you. One of the things, well, actually, I won't reference Findhorn because I don't really know what goes on there these days. And the book I read about Findhorn I have sort of scant memories of it now. But when I lived in Byron Bay, we had the healing center there, and people had come to the healing center from all walks of life, from all ideas. They brought, pardon me, hiccups, brought everything with them. As far as their identity goes, I'm a healer, and we had good hiccups. We had people who were like crystal healers and massage therapists. Everybody sort of comes from some trudgery, you trudge your way through the world. And I call it trudging because it's every time you get to a higher level or every time you have a shift, you see how hard you made it on yourself on the level before, on the, that rung before. It's like, oh man, I really put myself through all that crap, and to get to this place where it just, like Doug just said, it just opens up. But one of the things that occurred in Byron Bay that I really liked was you would sit anywhere on the foreshore. There was always a heap of people on the foreshore, lots of tourists and people enjoying the beaches there. In the cafes, at any of the event centers in town, which there was a lot because there was a lot of creative arts and things that goes on in Byron Bay, the piggery and different art spaces and stuff like that. you would meet people all the time who, and this is where I don't want to get into the idea of a linear progression, but you would meet people all the time who had skills or had practices that, in terms of getting out of your comfort zone, you could find yourselves in one of these people's circles. You could find yourselves being invited to some kind of ceremony or ritual or participation, and stuff would happen, right? Now, in collaboration with the Course in Miracles, of course, you realize that no matter what goes on, don't judge it, just allow it to happen. And many times I would find myself of the opinion, oh, no, I don't need to get involved in that because I'm past that. I'm doing the Course in Miracles now, right? But the Course in Miracles not only teaches me not to judge, but it also teaches that whatever shows up for me in any given moment is perfect, including things that I think I've left long behind or long ago, whatever. So, and I remember, and this is a funny story, I had this girl who was probably a little younger than me. I was living in my van, and she was a breath work practitioner. That was one of her things she did. She lived in a teepee, a homemade teepee, out on a property in the hills with, you know, lots of hippies and other people around. But she would come to the healing center sometimes. Her boyfriend at the time, Nanda, he was a very dear association of mine who'd spent 20 years in India learning tabla drums off some tabla master. And she would come sometimes to the healing center looking for him. And because I was like the caretaker there, I would close the gates at night, and there was predominantly women in the accommodation areas that were, it wasn't like a women's refuge or anything like that, but they were generally older women and whatever. And so I was kind of like the church warden, if you like. But she would come around looking for Nanda, and we would end up like having these big philosophical talks. And occasionally she would come to a session with Ted, you know, and just walk in off the street and whatever. But she was a very whimsical, kind of mystical association. She's sort of like very astral, la da da da, and you wouldn't give her much substance, right? If you were just to meet her in the street and have a conversation, she would seem very lightheaded and airheaded and all of this sort of thing. And I felt very empowered and very grounded with myself because I was at the healing center and going through a lot of stuff. And my perception of her was that I should probably try to invite her in more to attend the healing center more, as it would probably be good for her, you know, which was the complete opposite of what the Course is teaching me. It's like she had a gift to offer. And there was a moment where I realized that I'd been judging her, and that the next time I encountered her, I would make a concerted effort and make a deliberate decision to listen on a deeper level and to include in what she was presenting on a deeper level. And very strange turn of events. So I'd locked the gates one night. I was in my van. I lived in my van. I had a motorhome, small motorhome thing in the car park there, and all the cabins up the other end. And I could hear this rattling at the gate outside, and the chain and the padlock was on. And I thought, what's going on? Someone's trying to get in. And there she was climbing up over this gate, which was like, I don't know, 8 feet high. There was no barbed wire or anything at the top, but climbing up and over. And she said, oh, I went out and I said, Christy, what are you doing? And she goes, oh, I saw the light on your van was on. I'm just coming to say hello. So she came in, and I recognized within me at that time that even though it was completely out of usual context, it fitted in with my frame of reference that I had for her, that she would be climbing over this big gate in the middle of the night to come and say hi. And so I invited her in, and we're sitting in my mobile in my motorhome. And the next thing, she starts taking all her clothes off, and we're like having sex in the middle of the night in my motorhome. And she's doing her breath work, and she's saying, I want to show you this, you know, and she's doing these pelvic floor things while she's riding me. And there's this very like animalistic kind of thing to me. And she was instructing me as we were going on. We'd never had sex before, never nothing. This was totally off the cuff. And she was telling me about breathwork, how to breathe in from your base, you know, and bring it right up and out. And Doug, this goes to a little what you were talking, well, not really, but I'll get to it. And somewhere in the middle of that encounter with her, I had an experience of leaving my body, not in a full-blown revelation, but in an experience of feeling outside of myself, just through breathing. Right? Now, I've never had that again. I don't know how that occurred in that instant, but it showed me that there are many, many ways for the mind to open, many, many ways for experience to occur, many, you know, the Course in Miracles is just a passage of mind training, but it made me realize one thing. Don't get stuck in the Course. Don't get stuck in thinking this is the way. Stay open to everything, as obscure as it looks, right? Keep an open mind. And there were many other things that occurred, because so many people in that town were like of healers and whatever, and they all formed part and parcel of the experience that I had of going through transformation. They all put a little piece of the jigsaw puzzle about my own process into play, you know. And the experiences that you have and can have and will have through doing the course, through primarily, however, just through the willingness to actually have those experiences and to ask for them, can look like anything. So one of the things, Angela, that you were saying, and this is where I kind of want to thread back to, where you said your shift was different. It had changed. Let it change, right? Don't form ritualistic or repetitive patterns of association with your own spiritual process. Let the rug be pulled out from under your feet. Let it be brand new. Let things occur that, even though they seem to be out of the box in the middle of the night and just the wildest kind of encounters, let those things happen to you. Because you never know what anything's for. That's one of the primary lessons of the course. I don't know what anything's for. Therefore, don't judge it. When I become ritualistic in my practice, right, which is why when Jesus says at the end, and now there are no more lessons, you have no more further need for them, right? When I become ritualistic in my practice, I'm trying to forge some kind of an association where I think I can depend on things to look a certain way. Right? But there's no way I can do that if my goal is to have a universal experience where it doesn't matter what way it looks, it's always going to be exactly the same. Right? But that's only going to occur after that realization is only going to occur after. It doesn't matter what path, what journey, what activity, what anything. The form doesn't matter. Just simply apply the principles and you'll be given the opportunities to do that. I don't know if I'm making a good work of that one, but the nature of life on earth is constant change. The nature of life in eternity is constant changelessness. Right? So if I allow myself to enter into moments of being out of my comfort zone, saying yes to things that ordinarily I would perhaps say no to, and all these sorts of things, then change can occur. Otherwise, I find that I'm holding myself in this kind of ritualistic dependencies upon things that have served me up until now to get me to this point. But what's beyond this point? I don't know. So I need to let go again. I need to let go again. I need to let go again. I need to have an experience of what this moment's attempting to get me to see, not what I think this moment might look like based on something from the past. Right? Doug, same thing. There's going to be more. Where you went with that whole experience and everything as to being 30 seconds like an innocent child in the universe, there's more than that. Right? So allowing my mind to be in the constancy of staying open to the possibility of immediate union with direct source, right? It's an immediate experience. I just have to keep my mind and tell myself and instruct myself, this is what I'm about. I want this experience. I want it in the immediacy of my willingness to be open to it. I don't want to say yes to it today and then wait for 35 years. You know, I want it. I want it now. Jesus telling me I'm entitled to miracles. I'm entitled to remember my Father because of what I am as my Father's creation. God's waiting to give me everything right now. When am I willing to say yes to it on God's terms, which is unconditionally, rather than on my terms, which is, based on the limitations of my fears about saying yes to it? Don't be concerned that you might lose yourself in the experience. You will. You'll die to yourself completely to be reborn to yourself as you actually are. It's like Krishnamurti said, this is a journey for the very, very brave or the very, very stupid. And you kind of have to look at it that way. It's like, well, I'm probably very, very stupid, but I realize that in me that, has an incredible sense of gusto and there's some bravery there. So, you muster it all together and it's like, all right, let's do it. I'm drawing my circle. I'm going to draw my circle. I'm going to put myself through this, and whatever it takes, come hell or high water, because what else were you going to do? You're just going to go off and buy a casket somewhere at some point, weren't you? Go to the mortuary, pick out a box. This is a nice one. Oh, look, this one's got brass handles and silk lining. It's like, what, for a body? You got nothing to lose. That's the point, Tina, you have to come to. That's the point of realization that you have to come to in your own awareness. I got nothing to lose. When I went and spent the night on Mount Warning, I had nothing to lose. Right? I didn't know if there was a Jesus. I wanted to believe there was a Jesus. I'd never met him. I never had an experience of Jesus. But I knew I wasn't doing anything further my advance in forging some kind of relationship with Jesus by sitting in my living room every night watching television. I had to get off my ass and do something. So, and like that mountain, it called me. It called me. I put myself deliberately out of my comfort zone. I deliberately went, fuck this, and stepped into the unknown and allowed myself to fall by the grace of God into an experience of something that buoyed me up to show me the very next thing on my journey, the very next thing on my awakening, in my awakening that had nothing to do with the world. But I had to say yes to it totally in the recognition that I got nothing to lose. I didn't want to carry on with my life the way it was going. It didn't make any sense to wake up at 6 a.m. every morning and go and drive the sheep from one paddock to another paddock and round them up for shearing and doing all that sort of stuff. It was like, what the fuck? Why am I doing this every day? It's not that I job, but it just didn't make sense. Didn't make sense. There had to be more. I wanted to know. And that yearning within me to want to know, I mean, I guess everybody has it in their own way, but for me, it was strong. It drove me. It made me do things that other people looked at me and thought I was nuts. Yeah. I went right up on a mountain, on my own, on a mountaintop, wearing highly inappropriate clothing in sub-zero temperatures, pissing down rain, completely saturated. My life was on the line. I could have died from hypothermia. I had no way to get down the mountain in the middle of the night. I was there for the innings, you know. So I made the best of it and said my prayers and lit my candle and, you know, watch that video. It's, you know, like I look back now and I'm like, really? I did that? You know, that was just one little thing, one thing I did. You know, what it is that you'll do, I don't know. Maybe you'll be reading a book in the library and suddenly the universe will disappear. It could be as simple as that. I have no idea. But I always have a resonation with the teachings of Aurobindo, where he would encourage his students, get out and make bold experiments with your faith.
Yeah.
He would send them away, get away from me. You've heard my teachings. You know what I've got to say. Go and do this now. But it's like that mind training. Jesus says you have to overlearn the course to learn it. You do have to overlearn it to learn it. Otherwise, when you're in the whirlpool there, Angela, you'll forget to ask for help. You know? You've got to overlearn it to remember, I need to ask for help. I'm not without help. I'm not adrift and bereft upon the sea of whirlpools. I've got the Holy Spirit with me. But I have to remember to ask for help. I have to remember to ask for guidance. I have to remember every morning when my feet hit the floor to set my day up. Today's a day on my spiritual adventure. Today's a day on my purposeful adventure. Let everything this day reflect that to me. Otherwise, I'll forget and I'll be talking to Mrs. Sobody-so next door about the weather, and I'll be, you know, the whole day will go by and I'll get home and I'll be exhausted. I'll forget, completely have no clue why I went through that day at all. But when you go through the day consciously, when you go through the day purposefully, you're awake to the opportunities. You're vigilant for those connections, those beautiful relationship meetings ups that happens with people and situations and events that are set up for you divinely.
Right.
You know, you couldn't do a better job of it if you wanted. It's all set up divinely so you can listen, so you can give no thought, so you can enter into this from the perspective of reading off the old script to learn of the new one.
Right.
It's good stuff. But what it takes for anyone to reach that point where that's all I want, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know that faith is its own reward. Faith is its own reward. Make bold experiments with your faith. Do not let yourself fall into the trappings of comfort zones.
Right.
Right? And if you're fearful to walk out on a comfort zone, then I can't help you. The Course can't help you. Jesus can't help you, because comfort zones are simply repetitive cycles of thought that exist in the mind that you refuse to challenge, that you refuse to change, to enter into. It's not about making a physical journey in the world. I mean, do that if you've got to. If you've got to go to Findhorn and be pushed against the wall by some big fat bloody, that was one of the stories I read, so be it. But, you know, but it's here. It's in the mind. What's out there is just a slow time version of what's going on in here. It might take 10 years in meditation to sit out there in the world on a cushion in something, have some experience. But in here, it's immediate. I disconnect from the conscious level, and for a second I allow my mind to go where it actually is, where I'm operating at. It doesn't take time. It takes just a moment. But that moment occurs through the willingness to first push through the veil, to go beyond the level of consciousness, to go beyond conscious association, And if you're fearful to do that, then you'll have to wait on this side of the veil until finally you're sick and tired of your own fear-based thinking, and you come to the point where you're just like, fuck it, I'm doing it. I'm going to draw my circle. I don't give a shit. I'm just going to die anyway. What have I got to lose? Right? And that's a hard line look at it. That's a real hard line look at it. But it's not the truth about it. And everybody knows it. You know? You can't say yes to Jesus when Jesus says, give up the world and follow me. You can't say yes like the merchant on his way to sell his goods and say, yes, Jesus, but. There's no but. There's no but. It's all or nothing. It's either yes, I'm coming with you, or no, I'm not. There's no halfway. There's no, you know, be either hot or cold. Lukewarm is nothing. It's either yes or no. You cannot serve two masters.
And I think once you realize that that's all there is, that is
Yes.
all there. And once
Yes.
you realize that, and you have that in your mind, that is all there is, that yearning, and you know it's there because you have it and you've tasted it, you've touched it, and you know that that's all there is. And that Jesus is just waiting to give it all to you, just willing, wanting, desiring. It's all there, and his hand is reaching out. Yeah. And the incredible love that I feel around that, I can't express it. I know that I have to say yes. And once you know you have to say yes, you get the calling for that. You know, whatever happens next is going to be towards that, because there is nothing else. I've looked around. There's nothing else happening.
There's nothing else. And you know how you know whether you're true in that or not? Is if I was to give you an assignment right now, are you going to say yes to it? Or are you going to think about it? That's where
I'll say yes. I would have to say yes.
Ted used to get, this is really funny. Like, I look at it now and I see it as funny because I see that the whole thing was designed to bring up resistance and bring up our falsity, you know. But Ted would often give us little assignments, and so would Greta. Greta was my very first mother hen teacher. And I remember she gave me an assignment of playing the music in session one day, and there was these two tape CD deck things that you mix the music so one song overlaps the other one, you know, and the stereo buttons and knobs. I had no clue, right? We were just doing a meditation one day, and the guy that, I can't even remember who it was, the guy that usually played the music for it, he wasn't there. And Greta just taps me on the shoulder and she goes, in a best Dutch accent, my best Dutch accent, she goes, David, you can do the music. You know how to do it. Go and do it. You know? And I'm like, what? I'd never even been behind the little DJ booth. I didn't know what anything. There was just tons of CDs and all this stuff. But I worked it out and I did it. Like, I said yes to it, and the download came, and I just sort of knew, you know, I'd had one stereo before, but not two. And that was it. After that, I was doing music all the time. But Ted used to be the same. He would give us little assignments, you know, and you guys are going to proofread the 20-minute books that we're going to do, and this and that and the other. And man, it would push every button, because there was attitudes towards the healing center where you would just come along, you do what was thing, and then you go home. You know, there was no obligation particularly to have to put more of yourself in and to give of yourself more than just a cursory kind of participation. And when Ted would put you on the spot and make you, you know, you'd be faced with a decision about having to make some kind of more specific commitment to the healing center and thus your own process, it was threatening. Like, it was really like in your face. And one of the more in the face things that I had was the very first little outreach thing that we did. And I think it was Willem. Willem used to run the AA class on a Sunday out the back. And he asked me, I think, to take the AA and Course in Miracles side-by-side books that we had and take them around to the particular AA groups. And I said yes to that, even though I had no money and I had no idea how I was going to get all the way around the country. But it happened. You know, it happened. 3 of us ended up going, and it just miraculously happened. People supported us as we went around. But I had to say yes first. So pretty simple stuff when you look back at it, but when you can see that everything's designed as part of your own process, everything's just set up for you perfectly to be able to look at not only your falsity, but to be able to identify the opportunities within that, you know. But you've got to get out of that ritualistic thing. You've got to be able to take no thought for it and just say yes and enter into it without the idea of how it makes you feel. Because however it makes you feel, regardless, doesn't matter. In the end, it doesn't matter. You don't really have a choice. It's inevitable. How long you want to take is the only choice you have. It's like Jesus says in the Course, how long, Holy Son? How long? So it's like, be about it. Be about your Father's business. And Barry, I'd be interested to hear if you end up at Findorn. I mean, you may not, but there may be some other thing that comes to mind or is presented to you in your willingness to say yes to a greater unraveling, perhaps. But I'm keeping my finger on my nose with regards to that, because that's what I've been asking for also. Jesus always just tells me, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. You know, the last time I asked him for more was some years ago now, and he said to me, "What more could you possibly want?" It's like the memory of God is everything. That's the Holy Grail, you know. He said, "What more could you possibly want?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride." And he said it in kind of a firm, big brother, like, enough of your nonsense kind of tone of voice. Put me in my place, you know. It was kind of, it was nice, but it was like, oh shit, is Jesus cranky at me? Does he think I don't appreciate what's been given? So anyway, I don't know. But I'm ever grateful. You know, that's all I know. If I lose sight of that gratitude, then I know there's work to be done. It's like grateful for everything. An attitude of gratitude is what you develop when you learn to put faith, or when you learn to appreciate that faith is its own reward. It's like, wow, I'm grateful for the opportunities to go outside of my comfort zone. I'm grateful for the opportunities to step into greater experiences of myself, even if that means making a confrontation with my own fear, with my own doubt, with my own, and it will. If you're not making a confrontation with your own fear and doubt, then you're not really doing the work. I think that's Gangaji. If you don't find yourself in the turmoil, you're not really on the journey. Something along those lines. So finding the turmoil in life and confronting it with certainty of purpose. Without certainty of purpose, it's just turmoil. But when you confront it with certainty of purpose, it's opportunity. And good opportunity that's useful, because it means you're able to identify a pattern, a cycle, a particular thing that's going on for you again and again, and it will be again and again, because the lesson repeats until it's learned, and to make changes in how it is that you want to perceive it. Not changes by you, but changes through you. For remembering to ask for help. Help me to see this differently, Lord. How would you have me see this? There's no point trying to heal something with a concept. Let me look at what the Course in Miracles says about this. Fuck that. Stop looking in the Course in Miracles what it says about this. Ask for help. That's what the Course in Miracles is telling you. You have an internal teacher. That's what it's telling you. Your internal teacher will guide you perfectly through those strange encounters and through those opportunities to show you something pertinent and relevant to you in your awakening. It's the one awakening, but the symbols and the signs and the things that you're able to understand are going to be different in a certain regard to what occurs for me. Simply because your relationships have different values given to them, you know, as mine do. We all have different values added to our relationships or attributed to our relationships. And as we go through the undoing of those and become more in an alignment with a universal relationship or a universal brotherhood, then the nature of that true relationship starts to make more sense. It starts to reveal itself, which is why it's called revelation. All right, Tina, can you read lesson 64, please? I'm just going to duck out for a second. I have to use the office. If you'd like to read lesson 64, I'll be back very shortly, and then we'll do, I'm not sure what lesson we're up to in... Oh, any questions before I duck out? Kev, you got any questions?
No questions, but I have to leave about 20 past 8. So, sorry about that.
Yep, all good, all good. Anyone? No, all good. All right, I'll be back in a second.
Okay, this is can you hear me?
So what time is it?
Yeah, lesson 64. Let me not forget my function. Today's idea is merely another way of saying, let me not wander into temptation. The purpose of the world you see is to obscure your function of forgiveness and provide you with a justification for forgetting it. It is the temptation to abandon God and his son by taking on a physical appearance. It is this the body's eyes look upon. Nothing the body's eyes seem to see can be anything but a form of temptation, since this was the purpose of the body itself. Yet we have learned that the Holy Spirit has another use for all the illusions you have made, and therefore he sees another purpose in them. To the Holy Spirit, the world is a place where you learn to forgive yourself what you think of as your sins. In this perception, the physical appearance of temptation becomes the spiritual recognition of salvation. To review our last few lessons, your function here is to be the light of the world, a function given you by God. It is only the arrogance of the ego that leads you to question this, and only the fear of the ego that induces you to regard yourself as unworthy of the task assigned to you by God himself. The world's salvation awaits your forgiveness, because through it does the Son of God escape from all illusions and thus from all temptation. The Son of God is you. Only by fulfilling the function given you by God will you be happy. That is because your function is to be happy by using the means by which happiness becomes inevitable. There is no other way. Therefore, every time you choose whether or not to fulfill your function, you are really choosing whether or not to be happy. Let us remember this today. Let us remind ourselves of it in the morning and again at night and all through the day as well. Prepare yourself in advance for all the decisions you will make today by remembering they are all really very simple. Each one will lead to happiness or unhappiness. Can such a simple decision really be difficult to make? Let not the form of the decision deceive you. Complexity of form does not imply complexity of content. It is impossible that any decision on earth can have a content different from just this one simple choice. That is the only choice the Holy Spirit sees. Therefore, it is the only choice there is. Today, then, let us practice with these thoughts. Let me not forget my function. Let me not try to substitute mine for God's. Let me forgive and be happy. At least once devote 10 or 15 minutes today to reflecting on this with closed eyes. Related thoughts will come to help you if you remember the crucial importance of your function to you and to the world. In the frequent applications of today's idea, throughout the day, devote several minutes to reviewing these thoughts and then thinking about them and about nothing else. This will be difficult at first, particularly since you are not proficient in the mind discipline that it requires. You may need to repeat it. Let me not forget my function quite often to help you concentrate. Two forms of shorter practice periods are required. At times, do the exercises with your eyes closed, trying to concentrate on the thoughts you are using. At other times, keep your eyes open after reviewing the thoughts, and then look slowly and unselectively around you, telling yourself, this is the world. It is my function to save.
How pertinent is that lesson? The reason you react to that lesson and to those words, which are only symbols for things, is because somewhere in you already know it. It's
Sorry,
something.
Lee. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
All right, Kev. Have a good day or night, whatever it is over there. Remember your function.
Okay, thanks.
Peace.
All right, Kevin.
Tina, you're going to come up against it again and again. It's the same like Angela's thing. It's a threshold. There's like a limit there in your consciousness, and you're going to push up against it and push up against it and push up against it, and you'll be given the tools to go beyond it, which is always going to be miraculous. But you've got to remember your function, and you've got to remember to ask for help. One of the things that you see in this is your own attitude towards your own unlearning or your own undoing. And it's like, am I grateful? Or am I always fighting it? Am I always in resistance? And until you see the world for exactly what it is, you will fight it and you will have resistance, because there'll still be this hidden hope, this hidden agenda that perhaps there's something in the world that is going to fulfill you. It's not. But no one can tell you that. Just because I speak the words doesn't mean that anyone else is going to hear it. But I speak it anyway. I say it anyway. And somewhere in your mind, wherever you go and whatever you do, you'll have this memory in there of someone that once told you that there's nothing in the world that's ever going to fulfill you. Whether you read that in the Bible or whether you hear it in A Course in Miracles or in a Zoom meeting, the world you see holds nothing that you want. But you can't really take my word for it. I can tell you till I'm on my face. You have to work it out for yourself. You have to arrive at that own point, that own conclusion yourself. Oh, the world I see holds nothing that I want. Damn. That's devastating on one level and liberating on another. Which way do you want to see it? Glass half empty or glass half full? When you see that the Holy Spirit's purpose is prevalent throughout every interaction you have in your life, then it's always going to be glass half full. This is for my benefit. This is for my good. All right. I think we'll do the workbook lesson next Sunday. We'll carry on with the... How many do we have to go? Is there many left? We have like 20 or something?
About 100. No, about 100.
Really?
200. That's 365 days in a year, yeah? We're at 260.
And we're up to what? 260?
260, if I'm not mistaken.
We might do them in blocks of 5.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I was wondering this week what temptation was meant in the Lord's Prayer. For some reason, it just popped up in my head, and there it is at the very beginning of that lesson. Today's idea is another way of saying, "Let me not wander into temptation."
Yep.
Deliver me from temptation. What is that?
Yep.
Forgetting my function.
Yep. It's funny, you know, there's not a lot of people out in the world that are doing this. It's like when Jesus, you know, above all else, I want the peace of God, in that lesson where he says you only need to look around to see how few they really are. It's like, here we are. Above all else, I want the peace of God. To make that your primary focus. Life. To make that your overriding decision in all things.
Yeah.
The temptation to want to be right about something in a world that has no reality whatsoever. I kind of have to look at it that way. You know, you got to see it for what it is. It's like, holy crap. I'm trying to have my own way in a place that doesn't even exist. But you won't believe that until you go beyond it, until you experience revelation. And Tina, you are freaking ridiculously close to revelation. I have a feeling it's going to be down the rabbit hole for you rather than up the ladder. But either way, it doesn't matter. The way doesn't matter. The outcome that matters. It's like you have nothing to lose. Look at that idea, Tina. I want you to look at that idea. You have nothing to lose. Try to let that idea that you have nothing to lose find a home in you for a minute. It'll give you the impetus to want to go beyond where you're at now and take that extra leap of faith, because you're not far from it. Cool.
And then too, you know, when you're in that circle of light and you decide to lose everything, when you give everything up, then the choice is just given to you, because you've given everything up. And and that is helpful. And you know, several times I think part of where I'm at is putting myself, you know, clearly and firmly right there in front of Jesus, and saying, you know, giving it all, you know, every doubt, every fear, every concern, every thought, every block. And when it gets to be too much, going deeper and then making it more. And then when you think, you, of course, me, when I've done enough, then pushing it even harder and letting all the agitation come. And then finally, you know, and then the despair. And then finally, you know, the breathing, of course. And then whatever's left, you know, Jesus is right there. It's like all those blocks, Jesus is right there, just holding your hand. But I think that we're so conditioned, these rituals, they block us so much from this light and love. Sometimes we have to force ourselves, you know, and like Dave was saying, it's always there. And it's funny that sometimes we think we have to, you know, force ourselves to make it happen. It is always there.
There is a kind of a forcefulness in this, or an urgency in this.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't call it forcefulness perhaps, but an urgency. I really don't know how to, you know, talk about our boot camp. You know, when we do boot camp and you have the drill sergeant, and the drill sergeant sort of like makes you do stuff. You can do it. That wall, and run through those hoops, and pushes you, and he's right at your back, and all of that sort of thing. It's like that gives you a sense of direction and a sense of purpose, but you've still got to want to do it. It still has to be of your own free will.
Yeah.
You know? I always find when you say, fuck it, I've got nothing to lose. Fuck it. I have to do this at some point.
Right.
What am I pissing about for? You know? What am I mucking around here in time and space, waiting for something better to come along? Like, this is Jesus we're talking about. Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
Try to get a sense of that. This is Jesus, the guy that was nailed to a cross in the form, who said, haha, I'm not the body, and popped up again 3 days later. Here, put your fingers there, Thomas. You know? It's like that same Jesus. I love reading the Bible, and it's like whether you believe the stories to be real or not, it doesn't matter. You got 4 corroborations of the same story: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Apparently, the disciples, written through scribes and discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Peshitta texts. You know, how does that happen? It's like there's got to be, you know, there's no smoke without fire. There's got to be truth in those words. Whether I believe it or not is immaterial. I read those words, I don't know what the hell to make of it. I've seen John of God. I've seen Dr. Fritz. I've seen faith healers at work, and I can't explain that. But I've also seen magicians on the stage, and I can't explain that. You know, but I know that that's just a trick. But to restore someone's sight who's blind, you know, to raise Lazarus from the dead, to have all these corroborated experiences of the journey and the passage of Jesus through the particular places where he went and the things that he did. You imagine if you lived in a small village you know, perhaps 100 people in your village, and you got a blind guy there, and some stranger passes through town, lays his hands on him after he spits in the dirt, you know, and puts his hands and says, open your eyes and see. Everyone in that village would know what happened. Everyone would be talking about it. People would be writing that down. That'd be something they would tell from generation to generation for till this day. And they do. That's why we have holy sites and holy places, and people make pilgrimages to holy places. Like my friend Hamid bought 20 acres of land on the River Jordan, directly across from where John baptized Jesus. And they've built this little pontoon there, all these hundreds and thousands of years later, still commemorating something that people have not stopped talking about since its occurrence. They didn't just make it up. They didn't just say, hey, let's tell a story about something and build a pontoon and tourists will come and blah, blah, blah. "2,000 years from now, people are going to be watching these videos perhaps, and they're going to have some whole other technology of salvation at their disposal because of the work we've put in to raise the vibration, to make it easier for our brothers who have yet to be born. We're pioneers. This is only 2,000 years since the resurrection. That's nothing. We're literally still walking with Jesus, strapping on our sandals. 2,000 years in the grand scheme of things is nothing. You can expect Jesus to knock on the door any minute and, you know, you'll invite him in for tea. Try to get a sense of how close you are, of how, you know, it's like, whoa. If you had a ticket on the Titanic and you'd slept in that morning, you'd be running down to the dock and you'd still see the Titanic in the distance going. That's how close you are to the resurrection. You can almost taste it. You read that book, you read the New Testament, you read the book of Matthew and listen to the Sermon on the Mount, you feel it there. There's something that resonates through that occurrence, through those words, through those symbols, that takes you directly to that as an awareness of something in your own mind. If you went back another 10,000 years before that to Zoroaster or whoever it was, the first person to experience the light, you wouldn't really have much of a connection with it because the teachings are very scant and they're more relevant to a particular activity of his village and what went on there. But the teachings and the life and teachings of Jesus, you can taste that in your spit. Like there's dust, there's the dust of Jerusalem in my mouth. It's real to me. And you have to sort of find that place, I think, you know, like you have to find that place where it's real to you, where it's not just a story, where it's something that makes you get up in the morning and pray. You read that book and you don't just put it down and think, eh. You read that book and you think to yourself, man, that's some stuff. What the hell did I just read? And it changes you. It makes you want to change. It makes you want to be more proactive and more active in the ways of the Lord. And you know you've got to go through the valley of the shadow of death. You know you've got to do it. You know it's going to be deathful. You know it's going to be scary. You know it's going to be all of that stuff. But you do it holding the Lord's hand. You got to make that connection with Jesus. You got to make that connection with the Holy Spirit. Pray for that connection every day. New day, new moment. Here I am, Lord. Here I am. Take my hand. Do this with me. And you won't fail. You won't fail. Doesn't mean you won't have hesitation, but you won't fail. Keep the faith. Faith is its own reward, Barry. Faith is its own reward. Break the cycles. Step out of the comfort zones. Let something happen that's out of your control. And keep the faith when it does. Keep the faith when it does. Faith is the most incredible gift. Faith is something you just... I don't need faith anymore. I have no use for faith on a personal level. You know, revelation replaces the need for it. And in a sense, I look back on those years where I was practicing with my faith and making experiments with it and putting myself deliberately into situations that were, well, people would say you're crazy. But I was on an adventure. I was on an adventure, and I realized I had nothing to lose. I look back now at those, you know, that young man adventuring on his crusade. And it's like, fuck yeah. Fuck yeah, I did that. I did that. I found the Lord. I found God, or God found me, whatever it is. I did it. Since then, everything's just flowed. No need for faith, no need for belief, no need for anything, just knowledge, just truth. I love you guys. I love you, I love you, I love you at this very early juncture in time and space, only 2,000 years from the resurrection. I love you with the same love of Jesus, the same love of God, the same love of the Christ that's in all of us. I love you.
Love you, Dave.
I know you do. I know you do.
I love you too, Dave.
So do I.
I know. I'm very blessed. Do what you got to do. Be about your Father's business. Peace.